Imagine you have one last chance, one final conversation with someone who holds all the answers you've ever sought. That's exactly the scene we're diving into today, taken from the Srimad Bhagavatam. We're about to witness the final, incredibly profound exchange between the divine teacher Krishna and his closest friend Uddhava, right before Krishna is set to depart from the world. So let's start with a question that really gets to the heart of this entire conversation. What if the most powerful path to enlightenment wasn't some complex ritual or an impossible feat of self-control? What if it was something far more direct? Something you could actually start doing right now. You can just feel the urgency in this moment. Uddhava, who is this incredibly devoted and intelligent seeker, he sees that his time with his divine friend is running out. He knows this is it. This is his very last chance to ask what truly matters. And he feels the full weight of that. You know, he's not asking for wealth or for power. He's asking for the absolute essence of it all, the most direct path to spiritual perfection, not just for himself, but for everyone, especially for those of us who struggle. And this really gets to Uddhava's core problem, a problem, honestly, that so many people can relate to. The traditional spiritual paths, things like rigorous meditation and yoga, they're too hard for the average person with a restless mind. And what's amazing is we get to hear this in Uddhava's own words. He's not just talking theory here. He's speaking from a place of real empathy. He basically says, most people who try to wrestle their minds into submission just end up exhausted and discouraged. Sound familiar to anyone? This chart just lays out the contrast perfectly. On one side, you've got the conventional path. It's incredibly difficult, demands huge amounts of control, and often just leads to burnout. And on the other side is what Uddhava is practically begging for, a simple, accessible way forward for the rest of us. So, how does Krishna answer this really heartfelt plea? Well, he offers something completely revolutionary. Instead of teaching another technique to control your inner world, your mind, he gives a whole new way to see the outer world. The core of his entire final lesson is wrapped up in this one Sanskrit term, mud bhavaha. That's pronounced mahud bhava. It literally translates to my divine presence. So the practice isn't about doing something complicated. It's about seeing something simple, recognizing the divine in everything. And here it is, the key instruction, straight from Krishna. He says that someone with a pure heart should see him, that divine consciousness, everywhere, inside and outside of every single being, with absolutely no exceptions. Okay, that sounds really profound, right? But how in the world do you actually do that? Well, Krishna breaks it down into a guide that is just stunningly practical. Okay, just look at this list for a second. This is where the teaching gets truly radical and, let's be honest, incredibly relevant for our world today. Krishna isn't just saying, oh, see the divine in holy people or in a beautiful sunset. No, he says to see that exact same divine presence equally in a wise person and an outcast, in a thief and a virtuous person, in someone who is gentle and someone who is cruel. Just think about that. This one practice completely dismantles our habit of sorting everyone into good and bad, worthy and unworthy. And why is that so incredibly powerful? Because this practice is a direct antidote to the ego. The ego is what fuels so much of our anxiety and conflict. It's what makes us compare ourselves to others, judge people, and feel separate and alone. This practice goes right to the root of that. And get this, the text promises an immediate result. When you consistently practice seeing the divine in everyone, what happens? All those toxic byproducts of the ego, envy, jealousy, contempt, they just vanish. They can't survive in a mind that sees everyone as a part of the same divine reality. So Krishna boils it all down into 3 clear steps. First, you have to actively give up pride, that mental habit of judging and creating separation. Second, you have to physically honor all beings, recognizing the divine in them. The text is so specific here, saying you should bow down even to a horse, an outcast, a cow, or a donkey. And third, you just keep doing it with your thoughts, your words, and your actions until this divine vision becomes your natural, default way of seeing the world. So what was the effect of this radical teaching on Uddhava himself? I mean, this wasn't just some interesting philosophy for him to think about. It was completely and utterly transformative. And Krishna really doubles down on how important this is. He says it flat out. In my view, this is it. This is the highest, most direct path. It's not a shortcut. It is the supreme method of worship. And Uddhava's reaction, it's just pure emotion. The text says he was so overwhelmed with love that he couldn't even speak. His throat was choked up and his eyes were full of tears. You see, this teaching didn't just hit his intellect, it went straight to his heart. And here's his own testimony. He declares that the dense, dark fog of confusion that had surrounded him was just gone. The simple, direct path he had been so desperately looking for was given to him, and it worked instantly, clearing away all of his doubts. So, Krishna's final words, they aren't really a farewell. They're more like a commission, a set of instructions for Uddhava, and by extension, for anyone who hears this wisdom on how to actually start the journey. He gives him a really clear plan. Go to a sacred place. Live a simple, pure life. Work on qualities like tolerance and peace. But most importantly, reflect deeply on this specific wisdom and absorb your mind in this divine vision. And the promise is crystal clear. If you do this, you will attain the ultimate goal. And with that, the greatest teaching session maybe in the history of the universe comes to an end. But for Uddhava, and really for us, this isn't an ending at all. It's the very beginning of the real practice. So we'll leave you with this final thought. Let's forget the ancient texts and complex philosophy for just a moment. If you took this one core idea, madbhavha, and just tried to apply it, just for today, if you made a genuine effort to see a spark of that same divine presence in your family, your coworkers, the stranger at the grocery store, what for you would actually change?
Welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today, we are opening up a remarkable conversation. Really a spiritual blueprint for finding peace in a world that feels, well, anything but peaceful.
We're diving into a very intimate discussion between Uddhava and the Supreme Lord. And it addresses what might be the central human crisis we all face. Mental instability, fueled by just constant information and complexity.
Absolutely. And Uddhava comes to the Lord asking for what is essentially a spiritual shortcut, but not because he's lazy.
No, not at all.
He recognizes that the traditional path of, rigorous yoga and forcing the mind into submission, it's often just counterproductive.
The way he frames it is fascinating. He basically says that most spiritual seekers who try to wrestle their own minds into submission, they just get completely exhausted by the struggle.
Found out.
Totally burned out, dejected, and they fail. So he asks the critical question. If the hard way is failing so many people, is there an easier, more direct path?
And the Lord's answer is a resounding yes. He promises Uddhava that he will teach him a different way, a set of principles, a dharma that can help a person conquer death itself.
And this is the alternative for everyone whose mind is naturally unsteady, which I think is most of us.
It's a total shift in the framework. We're moving away from brute force self-effort into something else entirely.
A method rooted in connection.
So if this simpler path doesn't start with, rigid seclusion and grueling austerities, where does it begin? What's that first practical step?
It begins with a really fundamental internal shift about everything you do. Every single thing. The core instruction is, perform all your actions for the divine, keeping that presence in your mind constantly.
So you're offering your mind and your heart into the task itself.
Exactly. You find the meaning not in the outcome, but in the attitude of service you bring to it. It's a shift from self-effort, trying to make my mind quiet, to selfless effort.
That feels more like integration than segregation. You're spiritualizing your normal life, not running away from it.
Precisely. Your job, your chores, even a difficult conversation, they stop being things you have to suffer through and instead become offerings.
And I notice in the text, it isn't just dry internal contemplation. There's a lot of external engagement encouraged too.
Oh, it's vital. You're told to seek out holy places, sure, and the company of pure-hearted people. But critically, you're supposed to remember and follow the conduct of saints, no matter where they come from.
So it doesn't matter if they're gods, demons, or just ordinary people.
It's the quality of their conduct that matters, not their station in life. And this is the part people often miss. He specifically encourages celebration.
Right. The festivals, the singing and dancing.
Yes. Arrange great festivals with singing, dancing, even grandeur. It's a full life approach that engages the world with joy which is what prepares you for the next step.
Okay, so let's unpack that, because this is where it gets really interesting and, frankly, very counterintuitive.
This is the moment where the struggle can actually end. The pure-hearted person, the instruction says, must perceive the divine presence pervading everything within and without all beings, like the clear sky.
So if you accept that, you have to see it everywhere.
And you have to honor it. You have to worship every single living being as a manifestation of that same divine nature.
But the text gets incredibly specific here. It defines the truly wise person as someone who sees no qualitative difference in that divine presence, even in highly contrasting people.
That's the challenge, isn't it? The truly wise person sees the same divine light equally in a Brahmanya, a virtuous saint, and an outcast, a kajal,
In a thief.
and a thief, and a kind person and a cruel person. There's no difference in the essence.
That just shatters our entire social conditioning. We spend all day sorting people into good, bad, useful, threat.
And that habit of sorting, that constant comparison, that is the root of the mental instability Uddhava was trying to solve in the first place.
So to really hammer this vision home, the Lord gives an ultimate physical instruction, an action.
He does. And it's designed to obliterate pride. The devotee must offer full, prostrated obeisances, bowing flat on the ground.
Not just to a saint.
No, even to a horse, a cow, an outcast, or an ass. You have to physically bow down to the divine manifestation, whatever the vessel may be.
Okay, but how you practically do that? How do you bow down to a cruel person or a thief with the same sincerity you'd offer a teacher? Are you honoring their actions?
And that's the pivotal question. No, you are not endorsing the cruel action or the temporary role of thief. You are honoring the eternal divine essence that resides temporarily within that body.
So it's a practice to purify yourself of your own biases.
Through radical humility, yes. It forces you to confront all your egoistic distinctions.
Wow. If I were to actually implement that, my experience with the morning commute alone would be transformed.
And the sources confirm the result is immediate. When you sincerely perceive this divine presence everywhere, very soon all rivalry, all jealousy, contempt, egoism, it all just vanishes from the heart.
It just dissolves.
Completely. That constant, competitive, stressful feeling we carry just goes away.
So looking at the big picture, why is this path considered superior to the difficult mental struggle of traditional yoga?
I think it comes down to security and stability. The practice of this selfless dharma is never lost, not even a little bit.
What do you mean never lost?
Because the path itself is established by the Lord, it stands beyond the material modes. It's inherently secure. So unlike other things we do out of fear or desire, which are temporary, this practice accrues eternally.
That security is huge. It means you don't lose all your progress if you have a bad day or a lapse in concentration.
Exactly. And this leads to the ultimate wisdom, realizing that we have to use this temporary, perishable world, this body, this life, to attain the eternal and immortal truth.
Using the temporary scaffolding to build the permanent structure.
Right. And the Lord emphasizes that He is the goal of all human pursuits. Whether your aim is knowledge, or your work, or yoga, or even running a country effectively, He is the underlying aim of it all.
And the final attainment.
It's laid out very clearly. When a person gives up that attachment to worldly actions and dedicates themselves entirely to the divine will, they attain immortality. They become eligible to share in the Lord's own nature.
So after receiving all of this, how does Uddhava react?
He's immediately transformed.
Yeah.
Instantly. He says the dense darkness of his delusion has just been dispelled, like cold and darkness simply can't exist near the sun.
And he mentions his family, his relatives. He says that strong bond has been severed. Does that mean he becomes cold and detached?
That's a great question. And no, it's not a cold detachment, it's a higher understanding. He realizes that those intense bonds were created by the Lord's own energy, specifically to awaken this self-knowledge.
So he sees their purpose.
He sees their higher purpose, and that context releases him from their binding grip. It's a form of love, not a rejection of it.
Then the Lord gives him some very practical instructions for what to do next.
Yes. He directs him to a hermitage. He tells to Uddhava, go to Badarikashama, live simply on what the forest provides, and most importantly, reflect deeply, in solitude, on the wisdom you've just learned.
So the theory has to become an integrated, undeniable reality.
It has to become his reality. But the Lord also gives strict rules for who you can share this knowledge with. You can't just shout this from the rooftops.
Why not?
Because it's potent. He says it must never be given to someone who is hypocritical, deceitful, disrespectful, or an atheist. It's reserved for one who is already saintly, pure-hearted, and genuinely devoted to finding the truth.
What stands out to me looking at the whole thing is the efficiency of it. The text says, once this supreme knowledge is understood, nothing else remains to be known.
It's like drinking pure nectar. There's nothing else to taste after that. And Uddhava's final act just captures the immense love in this path. He can't bear to leave.
He's overwhelmed.
Completely. He places the Lord's sandals on his head, weeping, and walks away with such difficulty, constantly turning back. It's just this powerful image of devotion leading directly to transcendence.
This text, this whole blueprint, is promised to awaken anyone who faithfully studies it.
Which brings us to our final thought for you. What if the most profound liberation available to you right now isn't about doing harder yoga or struggling with your mind, but simply about seeing? Seeing the divine essence in every single being you encounter today, from the executive you admire to the colleague who irritates you, or even the humblest animal. The instruction is the same: abandon pride, honor the spark within, and bow down. So the question is, what distinction, if any, still remains in your mind when you look at the world, and how might you practically bow down to it?